we get started, we are talking about learning how to read the Bible for all it is worth. And we were talking some about some of the struggles that are involved in that. And I thought, let me give you an illustration, a modern illustration of some of the issues we have. So I'm going to have a pretend conversation with a friend of mine. Listen carefully. And please listen and tell me what you hear. Hey, Richamaki, how you doing, eh? Oh, yeah, and so, good, yeah. Oh, you got a hakey and anal? Okay, I'm listening. Uh-huh. Oh, that's a good one, eh? That's a good one. So, you's gonna go for that 30 pointer? Oh, yeah, of course I am. Yeah. Yeah, I'll probably go down by the Tapiola Duncan cutoff. Oh, yeah, it'd be good down there. Yeah, hey. Well, I don't know, the lake effect. I might be swimming up to my elbows, but we'll see. Yeah, you have a good day too. Hey, go Packers, eh? All right. Any idea what I was saying? What were we talking about?
Fishing.
Someone Canadian or Swedish talking about
Very close.
Talking about sports.
Okay, let's see. Yeah.
Deer hunter.
Deer hunt. The 30 pointer. The 30. That's the mythical deer. When you're in and this is from, and you're very close. This is northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, God's country, beautiful place. And the people up there, they're Finlanders, kind of like Swedish. So they're that TH gets pronounced either like a T or a D. And there's a lot of sentences end in A. Yaderhe, und so, yahe. A can either be a period, it can be a question. You doing good today, eh? Or it can be a statement. Yeah, it's a good day, eh? So, yeah, or it can be an exclamation. You just have to listen to the inflection. Hakey and anal. Hakey and anal are two mythical people that are the butt of every joke. Finlanders are very self-effacing. So where most cultures will tell a joke about a different culture, no, they talk about themselves. So Hakey and anal would be standard Finland names. And so they tell jokes about these two guys and how they're not very smart and they're, yeah, if you listen. I'll tell you one after, so it's not, on video or anything, because again, we got to be politically correct. I don't want to get in trouble with Finlanders, so.
Talk about Sven and Ollie then.
What's that?
Talk about Sven and Ollie.
See, same thing, right? Kind of the same thing. There you go. And then we end, go Packers. That is the end of almost every conversation because the Packers are life in the UP. So that's the conversation's over when someone says, hey, go Packers, eh? So it's done. But if you don't know any of that, now I was speaking English, right? It was English, but if you don't understand, and that culture is what, 600 miles from here? A mere 500-600 miles away. And if you went and filled up gas, you would hear people talking like that. But if you don't understand how they use words, like 30, or why I would use, that sentences end with A, it becomes very difficult to understand. How much more so when we look at going back to this culture that's way back, 2,000 years, and we're trying to understand words and their usage, because what we want to do is, again, I want to see what the Bible means for me, but to do that, I got to figure out what it meant for them back then. Okay, so let's go with our first slide. You all remember the tree from last week? Yes. One of the things we talked about with the tree is it's a tree, but depending on who we are, we might see different things when we're looking at that tree. If we're Peter and we're a tree cutter, we're thinking about how we're going to rope different limbs, how we would take it down. If we're an artiste, we might think about how we would, have the sun, clouds, that kind of thing. If you're a wildlife person, you're thinking about how many squirrels might be eaten off of that and whatnot else. And the point we were making is that it's all the same tree, but we're grabbing something different. And the same happens with this book right here. We go to this book and we see different things. And what I didn't talk about last week, but I would want to make this point this week, is what we see, what's the main thing we should see, is that what we see in this book is this incredible love story. And this love story is about a God, a creator God, who made this beautiful creation, and the pinnacle of his creation was man. After he had made everything, he made man. So there's fish, there's grass, there's everything. And we know man's the pinnacle because he made man in his image, right? And he says, hey, I've made you in my image, and I want you to rule over this planet. And even more than that, God puts him in his garden. But what does the man do?
He rebels and chooses to do what God told him to do.
Right. Did God have many rules? No. I mean, fruitful and multiply? I like that rule. Don't eat from this tree. Don't eat from that tree. There's 1,000 trees. But man rebelled. And what you see, and how many of you seen, most movies do this, but let's say Star Wars. The original, okay? The original, you've seen the original Star Wars? There's a song that plays through the whole, right? It's always there in the background. Sometimes when the action's slow or it ebbs away. Sometimes when things are building to a crescendo, it builds. But it's always there. It's always in the background. I would tell you the Bible's the same way, that you see this story where God gives man opportunity and man fails. After Adam's failure, God raises up Noah, and God, hey, we're going to clean the earth, clean the slate, brand new start. Then comes Abraham, and again and again and again. And you see this similar thing where God raises up, he raises up priests, he raises up prophets, he raises up kings, and it doesn't matter, right? Moses comes along, Moses has a shining moment, and David comes along. Man, David's looking great, he's doing all this great stuff, and then, and yet God's love, God continues to pour out love. And then we finally get to the New Testament, where his son comes along, and he does it right. It's all one testament, it's all one story, it's an incredible love story. That's the tree. Now there's things you can see as parts of the tree. There are some people that get all caught up in the second coming, and they want to spend lots and lots of time looking at, what does Revelation say, and what does the book of Daniel say, and they're looking at the tree, but that's the little part they're focused on. And there's other people that they want to focus on discipleship. They want to lose weight, they want to feel better about themselves, whatever. And so they read the Bible and they look for the passages like Paul and Peter might write to say, okay, this is going to help me to be a more disciplined person. But they're looking at little facets of the tree. And so I want you to keep in mind, we want to be able to see the whole tree. Those things are important. It's like looking at a diamond. As you look at different facets, they'll shine and they'll be brilliant. But you got to be able to see the whole thing. So keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to our next slide. All right. Our purpose, I said last week, I want to put salt in your oats. Anyone tell me what I meant by that? Right. Thank you. There's the old adage, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But if you put salt in his oats, he's going to want to drink. And I hope as we study and we look at things, you're going to be like, oh, you're going to want to study more. You're going to want to understand more. Once you improve your understanding, there are things we're going to look at tonight as far as with history, that if you don't understand the history, you will not grasp the full meaning, the full impact. And so we want to, part of this class is to help your understanding. And finally, the third is make disciples. If you've been a Christian a while, there's things you know that other people don't know that we just take for granted. So let's say you have a new Christian and you're reading a passage about a Pharisee. What's a Pharisee? If you're a non-Christian, what does that mean? Well, if you've grown up in church, you can take it for granted and you'll understand the story, but they won't. And so I want you to understand better so you can be a better teacher. Very good. Next slide, please. Our number one goal is hermeneutic. What hermeneutic means is we want to apply the word to us today. As I open this, I want to understand it and make application. The problem is this was not written directly to me. So I need to look at what this meant to the people he wrote to. Every book that is written is an occasional document. Does anyone know what that means when I say it's an occasional document?
Made for that time period.
Right. There was something going on. It was written at a time and a place with a purpose. There was something going on that had to be discussed, had to be figured out, had to be explained, usually something that had to be corrected, right? Usually there's something wrong, and like Paul is writing to say, hey, you guys gotta quit doing this, do that. But for me, I gotta understand about that people. And so tonight, what we want to look at is we want to do exegesis. We want to pull the meaning out of the passage. We don't want to create meaning. We don't want to put meaning into a passage. Even it'd be really cool. We use the example of in Corinthians where Paul says, do not be yoked with an unbeliever. And many times people use that for wedding. Hey, don't get married to an unbeliever. And that sounds really good. And it is great advice. But they never use the word that way. When you look at that time period, they never use yoked to refer to marriage. We might, but they didn't. They would have used yoke in referring to working. So I need to figure out what was going on, what was Paul addressing. But I cannot, even if it sounds good, I don't want to get in the habit of like, I got this point I want to make. Oh, this scripture will work really good, even if I'm taking it out of its context. It's no good. So that would be doing eisegesis. We want to do exegesis. We want to figure out the meaning and make it application. Next slide. Okay, so to do proper exegesis, we want to look that there's a historical context. Excuse me. So there's a geography, there's a history, there's a culture. There's all these things that play a part of historical context. And then there's a literary context. That these books were written in a particular style, in a particular way. And they were wrote in a way to communicate to the people back then. So tonight, we're going to focus on the historical context. I gave you guys an assignment for last week to figure out some things with Philippi. So what did you learn about Philippi, the city?
Sitting on a gold mine?
Very good. The area, it's not right on a gold mine, but within a few miles is a very rich vein of gold that was bringing in 1,000 talents of gold a year. Very rich. So a lot of people like that area. What else?
Historically, it's been a Philip, was it Philip something, like Alexander the Great's dad,
Mhm.
that first made the city a larger city, I guess, or something.
Yeah, when he found out there was gold in that area, and I think it was the Thyatirians were attacking the people of Philippi, and they're like, hey, will you come help us? And he was like, there's gold there? Oh yeah, I'll help you out.
Uh-huh. And then later, the Romans took it over.
Ooh,
And obviously, like, after Alexander the Great.
yeah. Speaking of the Romans, do you know what happened there with the Romans?
There was, should I keep answering or should I?
Well, let's see.
I'll let
Anyone else? Maybe your brother can help.
It was the site of a Shakespearean play.
It was the site of what? Of a Shakespearean play? Yeah, truly. And to Brute. What battle?
So after Julius Caesar was assassinated,
Mm-hmm.
people who supported him and people who assassinated him fought there, and the people who assassinated Julius Caesar lost.
Yep. Yep. So, what, Cassius and Brutus? Yeah, they lost. Huge battle. 110,000 combatants on one side, 80,000 on the other. It's like a 3-day battle. And at the end, no, I can't remember. My head just went. Psh. But yeah, Brutus died, Cassius died, and part of this is, and we'll see because we're going to go look at a map why this is strategic, this area. But it's interesting because after that battle is when Roman soldiers who retired started settling in that area. So it's kind of like, you know, they've been tromping around, they'd seen a whole lot of the world, and for, we'll see various reasons, are kind of like, you know what, this Philippi, if I'm going to retire, this is a kind of nice place to retire. So they did. So there's a large part of the population is Roman. Why don't we put up our map showing a little bit. Does anyone know what we're looking at right there?
Greece.
That red line.
Oh, strangers.
That is a road. And that road has the name. It's called the Egnatian Way. It is the superhighway that runs from east to west. Where's Philippi on that?
In the middle.
Right in the middle. Philippi sits, I think it's like 6 to 10 miles from the ocean, but it travels from way over. Thank you. Very good. That's awesome. So you can see the distance it covers over land. What's interesting is it was built, and this will be part of our culture, it was built by a Roman senator. Back then, you know, your service projects, they were built by like the wealthy families. They would build bathhouses, amphitheaters. Well, this guy built that road. And so you can see, you know, imagine, because again, what we want to do here is I want to try to picture this city, maybe start comparing it to what would be a city today that would be like this. So let's look at our next slide. There it is today. There's part of it. It probably doesn't look that spectacular to you, but it is over 2,000 years old. So it's, you know, it's had a little wear and tear.
Probably better than our roads will look into.
It has somewhat of that Iowa field road going out to the corn look to it. There are still sections of it that still exist today. And let's go to our next slide. This today is a major freeway. Kind of runs along the same route, doesn't it? Which is pretty interesting. It tells you, now you can see it runs south of Philippi now, but strategically, economically, having this main road tie all these cities together, uber important. And as we noted, there's Philippi sitting smack dab in the middle. All right, our next slide, please. Here is Philippi. And there's some cool things to see. You can see this road which is the modern road, that runs pretty close where the Via Ignatia ran. And you can see it pretty much went smack dab through the city. You can see that for that time period, this is a pretty big city. You can see the markets down here in this lower corner. This would be like the market area. Do you remember, is there a reason we want to know about the market area? Did you guys look at Acts 18? You remember what happened in the market area?
Lydia was a merchant.
Okay, that wasn't in the marketplace. That was out by the river first. Or-
landed Paul and Silas in jail.
Right. This is, Paul and Silas, they're traipsing around reaching out to people, and there's this slave girl who's behind them saying, hey, this man represents the great God, and he does it for several days, and Paul finally says, yeah, I'm done with that. And she loses that gift, and the owner gets upset, and they take him to the marketplace and get all crazy. What's really interesting, and this would be after Paul, you'll see this structure down here. This is a basilica that was built about 400 or 500 years after Paul. It was a huge church, and they built it right on top of some very special Greek ruins, which is kind of hilarious. It's kind of like, hey, you guys think you're something, but... and then there's another one, and one of these other pictures show it. You got it on that other slide? Yeah, cool. Look at this. Thank you. So you can see the earliest Christian basilica down low, and then you go across the way. There was the first big one at 500 BC, and then or CE after Christ, and then you see the B, which is where you can see it was big, and you can see the Forum. You see the theater. Again, like the theater in that time, the people, you didn't have like infrastructure, like the government didn't say, hey, let's build that. That would have been some wealthy person who, in order to get honor, would have built that. You see on the right-hand side where it says, to the river, that's where Paul met Lydia and such. But you can kind of see, and I love this representation, you can see how they've laid out the city. Here's the main road running right through the middle. There's gates on either side. They've got a high ground if they're attacked. But man, if you're a merchant, what a place to be, right? And it's an area that's temperate. So you could imagine if you're a Roman soldier where, you know what, this would be a nice place to retire. It's got gold. It's got wealth. Commerce is coming through. Okay. You see the marsh area too down below. That area, this used to be all marsh, and they had drained it and built this all up. Very good. All right, next slide, please. That was the end of it. Okay, good, good. So I want you to think, well, let's look, you looked at in Acts. We talked about in Acts, we could learn some things about the city. And so we looked in Acts 18, where we see Paul's reaching out. So let's go to there. No, Paul's 16, right? Yeah, 16, I'm sorry. We see in 16, in verse 11, Paul had wanted to go somewhere else. He wanted to go preach the word in Asia, but the Holy Spirit stopped him. Holy Spirit said, no, you ain't going there. And he saw a vision of a man of Macedonia, so they went to Macedonia. And in verse 12, it says, and from there they went to Philippi. They'd taken a ship, got off at Neapolis. From there they walked to Philippi. It's a leading city of the district of Macedonia, and it's a Roman colony. So let's talk about that for a second. What does it mean, you think, that it's a leading city?
Probably has governmental jurisdiction over surrounding area.
Yeah, it's at the very least, it's a very important city. You know, let's say there's a lot of little cities. It's the biggest. This is the one where most things are going to be decided. But it's also a Roman colony. What would be special about a Roman colony?
If you're born there, you're a Roman citizen.
I don't know that. That would be very cool if that's the case.
That's what my research said, but I don't know if my research was correct, because it was just a website.
Well, it could be. It could very well be. What else would be very special if you were a Roman colony?
Garrison.
There probably was a garrison there. Probably.
From what I was reading, it was like what Philippi was as a Roman colony is that veterans would be like awarded the land there,
Mhm.
and then also poor Roman citizens in Italy, they would give them land there so they could go there and not be poor anymore. Because to the Roman citizens were more important than other people. So, because there wasn't enough land in Italy, they gave land there.
Yeah,
So that's one.
absolutely.
thing that
Very good. Very good. As a country, the U.S., we have ambassadorships around the world, right? And we have embassies. So if you were to go to our embassy in Mexico or Turkey, what is special about that land that the embassy is built on? Exactly. If you step into the embassy, you are on United States soil. That's why people, like, when they're seeking, I got to get away, I got to get to a safe place. You step in the embassy, welcome to the U.S. Philippi is a Roman colony. Guess what? You just stepped into Rome. This is special. You know, not hardly any city has this special privilege. So to be a Roman colony was like, man, you've got all the rights, all the authority, all the privilege of Rome. And now you think you've got all these soldiers, all these Roman citizens. Clearly, you know, Philippi, it's just a nice place. And, you know, if you want to live someplace where things are happening, you know, we saw they got the theater going on there, there's money, they've got gold, there's commerce. This is a hoppin' poppin' place. And it's this place that as a Roman, a colony, man, if you're a Roman, this is the place I want to be. So let's see if we can figure out some other things about it. And in verse 13, Luke says that on the Sabbath day we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to women who had come together. If you followed Paul's other journeys, when he gets to the Sabbath, his first Sabbath in any town, where does he go? What's that?
Synagogue?
The synagogue. Does anyone point out an example? Look back a little bit. Let's see at Iconium, chapter 14, verse 1. Now at Iconium, they entered together into the synagogue. And if we went on, we can see every place he goes, Antioch, Lystra, all these places. Always, always, always. Sabbath day, first Sabbath day, he goes to the synagogue. Now, here in Philippi, he goes outside the river to pray. Why do you think that is? Yes, sir.
From what I've read, basically there's a, basically you have to have like a very specific or like a high enough number of Jewish men, I believe, to make a synagogue. So if
Yeah.
I remember correctly, it means that there weren't even like 3 Jewish men living in Philippi.
Right, very good, very good. I've heard anywhere from 3 to 10 families that if you were to have a synagogue, you had to have this number. And if you didn't have that number, the tradition was any Jews who were in the area meet by the river to pray. So
Is that what the down to the river to pray?
it could be. It could be. I like that. Yeah, that's where they got that song. Let's go down to the river. Down. It could be. That's how they got inspired. Yeah. So this town does not have enough Jews to support a synagogue. This is a very, very, very Gentile town. So now let's think. Try to imagine a town here in the U.S. What might compare to Philippi? If we're trying to, to try to really get a hold of what this city was like. Sits on a major highway. There's a lot of wealth. Oh, and the Romans, they're arrogant. They're Iowa City, right. Yeah, Iowa City would probably be a good one, right? It sits right on the freeway. You have these very, very, very proud, boisterous fans. Yeah, except for this Saturday. We'll talk more about that later. But that's what we want to do. I want to picture, there's this arrogance, this hubris, it's a place you want to be. What would be another city that you might compare it to?
Like Chicago.
Chicago sits on the lake. A lot of happening there. Great food. Iowa City doesn't have the food that Chicago has, sorry. Great food. Some arrogance there too, right? New York, the Big Apple. To them, where do we live? We're in flyover. Yeah, to them, we're in flyover country, right? This part of the United States, we fly over that. If you want to be someone, you got to go to the Big Apple. And certainly they too, there's just this arrogance, this, hey, we're it. I've thought of like Texas, like Dallas, Texas, because, Texas, what's bigger than Texas? They have that attitude. What's that? What's that?
Texas's ego?
Right. Well, when I have friends from Texas, they get boasting like that. I'll remind them, I'll say, you understand that Texas is the second biggest state in the country? And if you took the biggest state in the country and cut it in half, Texas would be the third biggest state in the country. Yeah, they don't like that, but hey, that's the way I roll. But you get the idea, okay? This is a very proud people, very arrogant people, a people that they think they're it. So now imagine you're the Apostle Paul. What might be some of the things that you're going to need to address with them? Because again, we talked about this last week. If you were the Apostle Paul and you were writing a letter to, what's the little town you live in again? Whittier. Whittier. I can't even pronounce it right. Whittier. There's a lot of pride there too, right? Yeah, go Whittier. You guys have like a, animal. Go Whittier bumblebees. Yeah. If you were writing a town like Whittier, it would probably be very different than if you were writing a letter to, let's say, the church at San Francisco, right? And then, yeah, hopefully. Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I haven't spent enough time in Whittier to know what's really going on there. But clearly, if you were writing San Francisco and you were an apostle, there's some issues with just the sin going on that you would be like, man, it'd be like a modern day Corinth, right? That you would be really hammering some of those issues. And then if you compared it to like a letter you might write to Kandahar, Afghanistan. What if you were writing, there was a little church in Kandahar? What would that letter look like? And so this is why we're doing that historical context. So we're getting this picture. So now we've seen, we've looked at it. They've got this road, they've got this gold, they've got this arrogance. Think about that as you read the letter. And see if you don't see Paul answering some things to people who might be a little full of themselves. All right, questions so far? Yes.
Not necessarily a question, but another thing that, one of the things I was reading and mentioned is that these people were probably also very loyal to Rome.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe being more loyal to Rome than Christ was a problem for them.
Right. Well, you have emperor worship, right? Emperor is considered God. So if you're going to place your allegiance to Christ, then you've got to let go of your allegiance to Caesar. Whew. That's a big, big deal.
Isn't that kind of the idea in China? Like if you're going to have an organized religion, then you won't like looking up to the government as much as you want you to.
That's exactly it. If we keep out any kind of religion, then you look to the government as being the answer. Absolutely. You look at most dictatorships are the same way. You know, they usually call the dictator like father this or papa this, and it's like, oh, he's the one that takes care of everything. So keep that in mind. Now, there's two special things I want to talk to or address when we look at this time period and Paul's writing. One of them is we're looking at the historical context, and this is something in our Western culture that's so lost, and that is the idea of the honor-shame culture. Have any of you ever heard that term, honor-shame culture? What do you know about honor-shame culture?
That it's common in most places other than America.
Today, even today, in America, we hold up all the rights of who? The individual. You know, you guys don't remember Frank Sinatra, but he was a great singer, and he said, I did it my way. I followed my dream. I did everything, and I did it my way. That would be so against honor-shame culture. Because honor-shame culture, your family name is everything. And you as an individual do not matter. Your family name, oh yeah, it's what matters. And you will do everything to increase that honor. And you will do everything to fight anything that would cause shame to your family. Anything that would bring disgrace to your family. And that was a huge deal. Huge deal. And when you read the New Testament, there's so many things that we miss because we miss the honor-shame culture. In the honor-shame culture, let's say Annette and I, we're both shopkeepers. But so we're at the same level. Because honor-shame culture, there's Caesar. He's the top of the top. You don't mess with him. And then right below him would be these families that are crazy, stupid wealthy, that have all sorts of servants. And it doesn't even matter that they're wealthy. They have the name. And that name is everything. And then below them, you might have, I would say like doctors and stuff, but even then, let's say as a percentage, your people that were super wealthy, that might be like 3%. And then there would be like another 10, 15% that were like shopkeepers, or like in Philippi, he meets Lydia, who's a dealer in purple. That woman's got money, because being a dealer in purple, that was special. Purple's for royalty. So she's got money. So you'd have maybe 10, 15% of these people that were shopkeepers and stuff. They're all kind of along that same strata. But I want to be better than you. You know, I want to have a little better name than you. And so there might be some bickering between us verbally where I can try to put myself above you. And then you would have had probably 80% of the population, or close to it, would have been bondservants or slaves. And to be a slave back then was, you know, it's not what we think like in the United States. Let's say Amy here, she's one of those rich people, and I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher by trade, and I become her bondservant to teach her family. And so I enter into a 5 or 10 year indebtedship where she promises to feed me, clothe me, give me a place to live, take care of all my needs, and in response, I will do everything she asks me. But she knows as a teacher, I'm going to be mostly focused on educating. That would have been typical. So, you know, here I am with Annette. You know, we're kind of equal, we're kind of shopkeepers. But I want to be a little better than her. And so, you know, there's going to be situations where I want to, you know, verbally, I might challenge her, and then she'll come back at me, and I'll see if I can one-up her or she's going to one-up me. Do you ever see that with Jesus? Can you think of any time where Jesus engaged in a banter with a particular group of people? Yeah.
As you explain more, I realize this isn't quite, because Jesus did do banters with the Sadducees and the Pharisees. But I was thinking in the Sermon on the Mount and stuff, he'd say, "You've heard it said this, but I tell you," and he'd one up the like if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because the teachers of the law, everyone's freaking out like, man, this guy teaches with authority. Where did he get this authority? Think of sometimes the synagogue rulers. Can you think of a time where Jesus did a healing and maybe a synagogue ruler wasn't real happy with it and said something like, "There are 6 days for healing. Come back on one of those days." And Jesus is like, "Really? So like if your ox fell in a ditch, you wouldn't help your ox out? But this woman, this daughter of Abraham, she should stay in bondage?" In that passage, it says the synagogue ruler was shamed. Whew. He took a major hit. Yeah.
The one about when they were telling Jesus that he heals people from like powers of Baal, that was kind of like to put shame on the good thing that he's doing, just to kind of downplay it too.
Right. Do you remember how he flipped it on him? Well, if I'm doing this by the power of Baal, how are your guys doing it? You know, you'll see him flip that. You see in Matthew when he has that dialogue with the Pharisees, with the Sadducees, and they're all attacking him, and he one-ups them. This speaks like we're like, okay, that was cool. But in an honor-shame culture, that's like, whoa. He elevated himself. He's showing himself to have more honor. In an honor-shame culture, you are always striving to have more honor. And of course, in that culture, we would say, oh, sexism is terrible. Because women, where the men are higher on honor, there's more concern of women causing shame. Well, we're afraid that, a woman, she might get with a man because you didn't marry then for love. That idea would be crazy foreign. You married someone because they could increase your social status. Hey, I'm going to give my daughter to your family because you're a little higher up the pecking pole, up the food chain. I'll be a little stronger in honor if our families are shown to be united. So there's nothing about love. In fact, there's a great, I wish I remember the name of it. There's a great Greek story about a king who actually fell in love with his wife, and that freaked everyone out. Oh, no joke. It's like, I looked upon her and suddenly my heart felt, and everyone's like, what is the matter with you? Are you crazy? Truly, truly. And I'll have to Google it and pull it up. It's funny. When you read it, it's like, this is hilarious from our culture point of view. But their culture point, it ain't about love. It's all about honor. And bring the family name honor. And upholding that honor. And like you were mentioning, it's that way over most of the earth today. One of my Afghan girls, Nadia, she's very clear. We talked about this last week as I was getting ready for this class. I was like, hey, talk to me about your family. She says, oh, my dad's word, absolute. And the oldest brother, she goes, if my oldest brother says to do something, I will do it. I said, like you don't have a choice? And the idea that she would have a choice was totally foreign. Like, why would I go against what my older brother would say? I mean, that idea was so foreign to her. Honor culture, that's like God. Your father, the eldest brother, whatever they say, I will follow. And she would say, I'd say like with her older brother, she says, well, he is wise. God has given him wisdom. I need to follow what he says. That's what we do. And so this is where this book is written, in this honor-shame culture. And I say that because as you read Philippians, you might come across, and I would look for, words like honor, shame. As example, Paul talks about Epaphroditus and what he did, and in chapter 2, verse 29, he says to receive him in the Lord with all joy and honor men like him. Now we think honor, what do we think? Oh, throw him a little party. Yeah, good job, give him a little sticker. No. This is, you lift this man up. Regarding that too, as I'm on that, Paul, because if you want to show honor, it's very important that you have credentials. So you think we have 2 gospels that begin, part of your credentials would be like, okay, what's your family tree? Sometimes we wonder, well, why are there 2 lineages, genealogies of Jesus? Because in honor-shame culture, you having a genealogy, it matters. And it's funny with that, because let's say, your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was okay, but like his brother was wow, awesome. Yeah, you could include him in the lineage. You could just kind of flip him. It was cool because he's still part of the family, and hey, it's great. So your lineage would be important. And things you had done. So in Philippians in chapter 3, Paul is going to discuss this thing. And again, think about this honor shame. And he's talking about people putting confidence in the flesh. He goes, I have more reason. And then here he launches in chapter 3, verse 5. He says, I have more. I was circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, I was blameless. Now today in our culture, if someone came and to Nathan, you say, hey man, let me tell you a little bit about myself, all right? I became a Christian here, and I've started these churches, and I've done this, and you'd be like, man, this guy's bombastic and prideful, and in honor-shame culture, that's standard. You can even look at some of the rulers of Rome. And you would see where they would list some of the monuments, like outside the city. There's all the list of their achievements, what battles they won, who they're related to, all of that. What great city projects. It's cool when you look at some of the writings back then. So like, and I can't remember the name of the senator that built the Ignatia Way. It could be, yeah, named it after himself. That would make sense. I don't think it is, but I would go with that. But likely, he very much, there would have been some honor. There would have been like, in the amphitheater, something going on, and they would have took the time to say, hey, this is so-and-so who has done this and this and this and this, and he is the child of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and he built the Ignatia Way. Everything was about honor and lifting up. So when you read the New Testament, you have to look with open eyes for that. You have to remember that we look and we think, okay, this is all personal and it's all about me and my walk with the Lord. But I've got to look through the lens of the honor-shame culture. And especially when you look at the stories of Jesus, when he's talking to like the Pharisees, when he's taking on the synagogue rulers, teachers of the law. It explains in Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15 begins with the Pharisees are aghast at Jesus because who is he talking to? Who is he hanging with? The sinners? What's he doing? Let me just turn to that because it's the sinners and...
Tax collectors and other outcasts.
That's it. Say it again.
Tax collectors and other outcasts.
Yeah, tax collectors. Those guys, they've turned against our nation. What are you doing? That'd be like a Purdue fan in your family. That's gross. That's disgusting. What are you doing? This is vile. That would be the attitude. That touches on another thing. When you think about this culture, you have to think of the attitude too about sin. Because the attitude is, if my life is good, it's because God has blessed me. And Peter, if your life's not good, you're a leper, it's because you sinned bad. I mean, you've done something, and God is, and God is just, so God is not smiling on you, and so it's okay if I don't smile on you because you're getting what you deserve because clearly you were not a very good person. And so they would have looked down on people in this honor-shame culture. If you're a leper, well, clearly you sinned. Remember when the person's born blind and the disciples come to Jesus? Who sinned? This guy or his parents? Is this guy a consequence of his parents' sin? Or did this dude do something? What did he do that he's born blind? That's the assumption. And Jesus, of course, answers and says, no. This has happened that God might be glorified. But look at what he's walking into. People assume if you're down here, you're either sick or you've done heathen things, and you're a tax collector, you're way down. You are shameful. And the idea that in the shame-honor culture that you would hang with anyone below your social standing, you don't do it. You can read Plato, Aristotle, the other philosophers. Man, they write reams on how specifically, you do not hang with people below your status. Like they have whole rules set about the people you can talk to, when you can talk to them. And it's all about how important it is to maintain honor. Think about how Christianity comes into this. And especially as you read Philippians. And Paul says something in Philippians 2 to them, like, your attitude should be the same as Jesus Christ, who being in the very nature equal to God, did not consider equality with God with something to be grasped, but became a servant to the point of dying. We got to grasp how that blew their minds. This is like totally against their culture. And so there's just a lot of, I got to do what? I got to submit? I got to love one another? Does it make more sense when you think about where Jesus is talking with the lawyer and the lawyer says, hey, who is my neighbor? We look at that like, man, why are you asking that question? It's an honest question. I got to love my neighbor, but okay, that means, like me and Annette, we're the same level, so it's okay and I need to kind of love her, but, Peter, he's, I can't, I'm not going down to that level because that would dishonor my family name. That would be bringing shame upon my family. I don't want to do that. Well, you know the story then Jesus tells. And this now segues into other part that we have to know. If you want to really understand the New Testament, you have to understand Jewish culture. In that story, Jesus tells a story about the good who? Okay, I'm a young Christian. Samaritan. What's that mean? I mean, okay, I'm from Iowa. Does that mean he was like from Indiana? Does that mean he was from Florida? Yeah. It kind of plays that way, don't it? Like, ooh, what's a Samaritan? Why is being a Samaritan relevant in that story?
They're like half Jew, half Gentile, right?
Yeah. So here you had the crowning glory. You had King David, and right after him came the King of Kings, King Solomon. The Israelite kingdom was at its absolute glory, right? I mean, Solomon's this wise king, and he's bringing in gold, and he's got chariots, and the kingdom is expanding, and, they're building the temple, and everyone's living great, and it's awesome. But unfortunately, he started well, and at the end of his life, he didn't end well, did he? He had his 700 wives and 300 concubines and started worshiping other gods. And so God says, as a consequence, I'm tearing the kingdom. And so when he tore the kingdom, 2 tribes stayed together, Judah and Benjamin. The other 10 tribes split. And when they split, the northern tribe, that's what we consider Samaria, they turned away from God. They started worshiping on their own mountain. They started doing other things. And the true Israelites, here's the shame honor, when you guys did that, you destroyed the kingdom. And so for the next years, up until you come into the time of Jesus, they're just fighting each other because they see them as having pulled away from God, started worshiping other gods, tearing the nation apart. And so there's just this serious hatred to the point, if you were an Orthodox Jew, and let's say you were down here in Jerusalem, and right north is Samaria, and then above that is Galilee. If you were a really devout Jew, you would not walk through. You wouldn't take the short way. You would walk around to go to Galilee because you would not touch your feet on Samaritan soil. And so now you have this story that Jesus tells, and the guy says, who's my neighbor? And he goes, well, let me tell you about being a neighbor. Here comes a priest. This guy's beat up. He's on the road down to Jericho. And again, it's interesting because literally Jericho is down from Jerusalem. And this guy's beat up, and he's laying by the side of the road, and first comes a priest. Well, okay, priests are pretty cool. Yeah, he walks around the guy. And we can say, okay, well, that guy, he might have been faking that he was injured. The priest might have been going to offer sacrifices, and if that guy was dead, he would be unclean. He walks by. And then a Levite does the same thing, walks by. And then comes a Samaritan. Can you imagine that teacher of the law when all of a sudden he said the Samaritan came by? That's one of the lowlifes.
Possibly an analogy for that would be, it's a Virginian in the middle of the Civil War.
Right. Yeah.
Locals, look, we hate those guys, they hate us, they're the terrible people, we're tearing our country apart.
Exactly. That's a great illustration. great illustration. You think back to our Civil War. If you took someone from the North and made them a hero in the South doing something, no. That is the level of, But this Samaritan, even though he is this horrible lowlife that is unworthy and you should despise, this guy does everything you would expect a neighbor to do, right? He takes this guy, even though he doesn't know the guy, he's got other things to do. He takes the guy, he cleanses his wounds, he puts him in a hotel, he gives the innkeeper money, and this guy's in enemy territory. Can you imagine that, you got the northerner who is in Georgia and helps out a rebel and does all these things, and he's all wearing his Yankee outfit the whole time? It'd be like, no, this cannot be. And I love in that story because Jesus is such a genius teacher, as you well know. Does he ever answer the question, who is my neighbor? What question does he answer?
Doesn't he ask who then was the neighbor to the...
Yeah. And the guy never says Samaritan. He says, well, the one who showed mercy. And then Jesus says what? Go and do likewise. Jesus never answers the question of who is my neighbor. He answers the question, how do you be a neighbor? That's the question that should have been asked. But I want you to think about that. Okay, think about, because this too, as you're reading Philippians, the idea of circumcision, things about being a Jew, being an Israelite, they come up. And if I don't understand them, I'm not going to grasp fully what Paul's trying to say to them. Okay? I know we've covered a lot of heavy stuff tonight. Any questions? Okay. Yes.
We had been talking about something, and one of the notes I said that I had written down about it got me thinking, so give me half a second here.
Yes. No worries. Even though you're down here, I will take the time and patiently wait and listen.
Being a very nature guy and you're just imitating him.
Yeah.
So, you asked about Paul's letter patterns, which I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about at all. One thing, just my online research told me, I didn't notice this.
Yeah.
Said that Paul doesn't mention his apostleship, like Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, in his intro. But I didn't really grasp how it was relevant, and at the same time, I also felt like Paul still does a huge appeal to honor, or at least context of his honor in Jewish society when he says, "I was this, and this is what it means." Right there, that was in the passage we were looking at, like the Hebrew of Hebrews and whatnot.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure what a real answer to the question of how is his not mentioning his apostleship, or is there another difference in his intro?
It's a great question. In the books that he mentions his apostleship, like Corinthians, his apostleship is being questioned. And so he's got to say, hey, this is who I am. This is my honor. I didn't bestow this on myself. I met Jesus. When you read the Philippians, you see that he has a really tight relationship with them. So there's no need. He doesn't have to say, hey, this is who I am. In fact, his relationship is so good with them, what kind of things does he say? Follow me as I follow Christ. You have seen my example. You have seen what I've done. And that actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I got to say it really briefly. Acts 16. What are some of the things that happened to Paul at Philippi? He met Lydia, baptizes her family, stays with them. He goes into town, heals this girl from the demon. That gets him in trouble, right? He gets beaten publicly. He gets thrown in prison. What happens to him in prison?
There's an earthquake, and all the cell doors open,
Yeah,
Taylor's family.
right on. Before the earthquake, what are him and Silas doing? They're singing hymns to God. They've just been beaten. They're chained naked in an inner cell. And they're singing hymns to God. And the other prisoners are listening. And evidently the prison guard too, he's hearing this. The earthquake comes, the prison guard, he's ready to just end it. Because under prison law, anyone you lost, yeah, you take their place. No, I don't want that. Jesus is like, stop. And that guy too, he converts that night. And I point that out because we know 2 converts, right? As he's writing this letter, that jailer and Lydia, they're part of the church, right? Or hopefully, they're still part of the church and he'd be writing them. And it's important too, and we want to know what happened to him because at the end of chapter 1, he says something. And here's where we're going to end it. In chapter 1, in verse 29, he's talking to them about your faith, and you look at that. Verse 29 says, "For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ, you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake, engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have." So part of the struggle going on in Philippi is they're undergoing persecution. And so it helps me to read Acts to know what happened to Paul there and go like, ooh, they're going through some hard times. There's some struggle in their faith going on. Okay, you guys have been exceedingly patient, wonderful. Next week, we are going to look at translations and how do we get from Greek and Hebrew to this. And how come this is in ESV, how come the ESV is different from the King James and different from the NEB and all those other little acronyms? And we're going to explain a bunch about how you translate and different theories of translation. Please continue reading through Philippians. Just start developing that field. Read it out loud. Said last week, read it out loud once a day. Try it in a different translation, or maybe even 2. And just see if it feels different, or you catch different words, different things are phrased different. But, and think about what we've said about history, honor, shame, culture. Look for those words. Look for some of the things. If you are a Roman soldier, what might be words that would be like, or if being part of Roman culture is important. Maybe there's trigger words that Paul might use. They'd be like, oh, I get that. All right. Let us close with a word of prayer. Who would like to close us? All right.
God, I think for this time tonight, we have to study your word and learn more about it. I pray that you would give us all insightful studies throughout the week, 2 weeks. I pray that we would come back with fresh insights for this discussion.
Amen. Well, thank you, thank you. You guys are wonderful. I know I threw a lot at you. Whew. Then I'm sorry, Peter.
I enjoyed it.
Good, good. Yes.